We went to Alabama. How much?
And I get a lot of crap from they capitalize on their fitness to survive. There's 6 of guys. 6-year-old is a boy, the 9-year-old is a So now my mother is laughing constantly, and I said, "What? That's so much."
Oh, hey, how do you think? Oh, so you really do know. We had the mom drops her off for a lady's birthday party. And she's like, oh, Get stuff together. Some of that. I wasn't putting the category up here. But I started doing my jacket. And a lot of others. All right.
That's it. But also the girls that I know, they don't often it's like pain and stress. I mean, it's but it's like my daughter is like a weight. Well, I used to be. No, it's so funny. My husband's quite tall actually, but he's 70. She probably will because her feet are, but she's actually kind of small. She's like me, but on an Indian, like a Central Indian. Like she's got darker skin, she's beautiful dark hair. And my son looks white, and he looks like Karthik's face with a black face. It's terrible. They look like the opposite. They look like the parent of the gender they have with the opposite aspect. They're so funny. She is pretty. She is pretty. But she's projects, and there's like, whatever, and the boys are just racing around throwing things. It's ugly. It's terrible. Yeah. This is Elena, my daughter, and this is Ethan, my son. Everybody laughs at me because I'm almost Jewish, so I'm technically Jewish. And my husband's family is all South Indian, traditional Hindu family. And we named our kids Elena and Eva, and we were like, where's that from? And we're like, we didn't upset anybody. We totally clear up the conflict. He was the Northeast Wasp, so he was a very non-religious person. I can't even say. Well, not particularly, but I guess I would maybe I'm more culturally Jewish than anything, but we don't do. We do holidays for fun. Well, you'd never be at work. I know. What's your time job? I grew up in Fort Mass. Yeah, I grew up in another college town. Yeah. Oh, did you? Really? What part of New York did you live in? That's where, oh, okay, great. Yeah, I have cousins who live on Lydian Street, so kind of in between, like, yeah. Yeah. Oh, really?
How's everybody today? All right, welcome back. 2023. You're at the East Chapel Rotary Club, in case you're wondering. And we're so happy to be here together. As we're diving into lunch, Jennifer Player has agreed to return thanks for us.
Wherever you like.
I'll stay here, I think. All right, we'll bow our heads. A new year is a time for new beginnings, as well as a time to reflect on the past. It's a chance for us to celebrate our successes and plan to have a wonderful year. As we approach this year with a fresh perspective, let us continue how we can use the next 365 days to make a difference in our community. Let us be thankful for what we have achieved as Rotarians and mindful of our commitment to making the world a better place.
Amen. Thank you. Y'all want to start the fine basket here? With Dan. I'm Nick Vaughn. I'm your Sergeant at Arms today. If you're a guest today, we have, I think, 13 of them, so we're on a tight schedule. We want to get to our speaker. So if you're a guest today, please stand up. We want to recognize you. Say hello. Welcome. Please come back. We'll make you stand up and embarrass yourself at greater length, but today we're going to move on. So, a new year. How many of y'all have made a New Year resolution? I feel like Lorenzo, maybe, Diane. Okay. How many of y'all have already broken your New Year's resolution? How did dry January go for everybody? Well, I think in addition to resolutions, we think about bad habits we can shed. We think about reflecting on why we do the things we do. And so each year I'll ask myself a series of questions. I'll think like, why is my golf score not getting any better? Alan, maybe you've got some feedback for me later. Like, is this particular workout I'm doing still effective? Why are we doing things a certain way at work? Should I be spending my time a little bit differently with the family or whatever? And so kind of along those lines, as we think about inviting some of these 13 guests or whomever to join us at East Chapel Hill Rotary, I think an important question to ask ourselves is, what is it we're doing here anyway? What is East Chapel Hill Rotary all about? And so as I was preparing for today, I asked a few of our members in a one-sentence, quick, visceral kind of way to answer the question, what does East Chapel Hill Rotary mean to you? Steve Fromme, who's been here since the 1910s, says, now that I've stalled long enough to look up the meaning of visceral, I'll try to answer your question. East Chapel Hill Rotary is like a safe place, a sanctuary at which you can attend meetings, knowing you will be among friends, forgetting your worries and concerns while there, have some laughs, hear a great speaker, all while trying to figure out what exactly you're eating. Alan Young says, my immediate thought was friendship and community, a place where I've had the good fortune to meet wonderful people like you. Haven't worked Alan's answer in, obviously. Our visiting, let's see, what would Jennifer be today? In her office is our prayer. She says, East Chapel Hill Rotary means I get to build relationships with a group of people that I normally wouldn't encounter in my daily life. It's an expansive reach. Matt Hatgood says, Rotary is my happy place. Always a joy to have a Friday lunch with friends, get a good laugh from the sergeant at arms, hear a great speaker on diverse and interesting topics, and know that Rotary is doing good deeds to support those less fortunate than ourselves. I'm sure each of you has your own unique answer to this question. What is East Chapel Hill Rotary to you? And they're all beautiful reflections of the community, the fellowship, and service we enjoy here. But as I was trying to further distill the true meaning of our club into a concise, powerful, one-sentence phrase, I'm sure it won't surprise you that a man who is never at a loss for words, Rob Maitland, provided an answer that still puts a lump in my throat. He summed it up perfectly. Rotary, for me, has served like the church I've always hoped to find. Amen. Omar?
Thank you, Nick, and great to have everybody back. I'm Omar Zinn. I'm your president. We have a wonderful speaker today we're looking forward to. We have a few people that are going to make a few announcements prior to that. But before we get to them, I'd like to talk a little bit. It's obviously January 6th, and January 6th is an important day for many reasons. People have recently said to me that, that my election was rigged, that I shouldn't be up here. Certain accusations have been made, but needless to say, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I do want to thank Alan and Rob and Bill for a wonderful, wonderful holiday program. You guys tore the roof off once again. Great job. We have a quick presentation by Pat Phelan about our website. So I'll hand it off to Pat.
Hey y'all, good to see you.
Hey, Pat.
Good news. We have a new website. Yeah, it's been a while. It's been a good decade or so. So it looks like this, and I encourage you to go on there. It's the same domain name, echrotary.org. So the thought behind this is this is the place where you go to figure out, link up with other members, to sign up for opportunities, for service, any information you need. Before I get started on a couple of things that it does right now, what's important about this, we had a website in the past, and it was great for about 15 minutes, and then we never updated it. This will be an ongoing thing. This will be updated at least quarterly with fresh information, fresh pictures, things like that. So a couple things, 2 reasons why you should go to the website. I think the first one would be to contact a fellow Rotarian. So if you look at, let me just fire this up real quick. If you look at the members' names are all on here, and you can actually send a fellow Rotarian. Let's page down. You could send a fellow Rotarian an email. If you wanted to contact that person or get contact information, you can go to our database, which is called DACDB, and there's a link on the website for that as well. So, Jeff, did you have a question?
That doesn't have our actual emails in there, does it?
It does not.
Oh, okay.
It does not. So I could punch your name, contact, send you an email, but your address is not in there.
Okay.
Phone number's not in there, and then there's a little thing you have to some security in there as well. So yeah, we're not going to. We didn't give out your information quite yet.
Password protected.
This website is not password protected. You just log on echrotary.org, and then you're set to go. So that's the first reason you might go on out this weekend. The second reason is whenever there's an event, the event will be put on the website. Just get this real quick here. So who our speakers are. There's a trash pickup at the end of the month. You can go out there and get all the information about the events going on at the club. And this is the part that will be updated on a regular basis. The other thing you can do, if there's, for example, the trash pickup, at the very bottom of the front web page, you could sign up to volunteer at that event. There may be several events on there, but you'd go to the website to sign up to volunteer at that event as well. So ongoing things. We've got other events coming up, and it will be updated accordingly. So there is a committee that is going to be in charge of the website, and we are going to make sure that this thing gets updated as necessary. On the committee, we could really use some help. So far we have on the committee is a financial guy, a lawyer, and a business executive. What we're really missing is a tech guy or a tech person. So this thing is written in WordPress, which doesn't mean a lot to me. I don't know what that is. But if you're familiar with WordPress, have worked with WordPress in the past, we would love to have you be a part of the committee. It will not be a lot of work. This won't be a thing to where you're contacted every week. It'll be essential. You'll be helping out the club a whole bunch. Any questions about anything that you see on there? Contact me. There's some stuff on there that's already outdated. We're going to update that, but let me know, and we'll kind of go from there. Anybody have any questions? Oh, there you go, Matt. How are you doing, Matt?
Good.
Good.
What time does this club meet? I mean, I thought I knew what time we met, but apparently I'm wrong, and apparently...
So it's 12:45?
Till?
1:45? Apparently you're staying too long, Matt. You gotta get out of here.
I've worn out my welcome. I need to leave earlier.
That's right. So that's one thing the committee will change right away.
Pat, congratulations on an awesome looking website. What we have is a dinosaur. This is awesome. It's what we need to support our efforts, and I know you spent countless hours on it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Just wondering, does whoever knows WordPress, please raise your hands. Okay, just checking. If you'd like to learn WordPress, we're looking for warm bodies. Vincent Arba has an announcement. Please come up, Vince. You guys know that we had the duck race fundraiser. It was a brilliant idea. It wasn't quite enough water running down Bowling Creek, so we came up with another idea. We've been working on this for months, and Vince is going to tell you about it.
Hello all. Happy New Year to all of you. Great turnout today, so keep it up. What I was here to tell you about is our fundraiser for 2023, which is going to be a raffle. It's going to be electronic, so you will see it on the website here shortly when we figure out how to put it on here. In the meantime, you'll see it. You'll see the link via your email here shortly. We're going to ask all of you to try to help sell raffle tickets. Okay. The raffle is intended to raise funds for our big partner, the Public School Foundation and the Teacher Supply Store. So in addition to everything else we do, we're trying to do this, and the funds minus the winnings will go to the Public School Foundation. The winners will on the day of the 5K race, which is March 18th, this year, the Public School Foundation holds this yearly 5K race in Chapel Hill. Finishes up at McCorkle Place, I believe. We're going to hold the drawing for the winners after that. There'll be 3 winners, $1,500, $1,000, and $500 in cash. Well, electronic cash. Not crypto, but some kind of cash. Let's see, what else? Yeah, so the three winners, and the website that we're using to facilitate this raffle is called Rally Up. And you guys will all get a link to that here very soon, if not later today. And through some sort of email, it'll also be on the website. We'll put it on the Public School Foundation. So we're going to do everything we can to kind of promote this and sell raffle tickets. The raffle tickets will be $10 each. The way the website represents those is as 10 entries. So basically, you'll get 10 entries for $10, which is called the equivalent of a raffle ticket. So you can buy raffle tickets in sort of 10 entries, 25 entries, 50 entries, and 100 entries. So basically, a 10 spot to $100 or 10 tickets, if you will. We would like, hopefully, everybody in the club to sell 10 tickets or more. And if we're able to accomplish that, we would actually raise about $15,000. We're also going to be broadcasting this quite a bit to the Public School Foundation and all the people that they're connected with. So hopefully we'll sell a lot more tickets there as well to either racers or other people. And so we've got a stretch goal of about $25,000. And the sky's the limit. We'll see how this all goes. Relatively easy. You just do all your transactions online. For $10, you'll actually pay a few extra cents for this tool, Stripe, that actually sort of consolidates the money and gets it into our bank account from the credit card charges. So when you look at your bank account, your credit card bill, you'll see a little bit more than a $10 charge for a $10 ticket. So anyway, that's it in a nutshell. Yes, sir.
So just to recap, March 18th, there's a 5K race sponsored by the Public School Foundation. Okay. We are linked to all the emails of all the parents whose children attend Chapel Hill Carver City Schools. They'll be getting an email about our raffle fundraiser. All the people who have raced in this event before, thousands of people have raced in this event. I think they have about 3,000 or 4,000 people that race every year. It's a huge race. At the end of the race, which terminates in McCorkle Place, we will be pulling the raffle ticket winners. You don't have to be there to win. A raffle ticket is $10. Okay, we want to sell as many raffle tickets as we can. It's just an electronic link. Ryan Swafford and Vince have put a lot of work into this. There's already a website, which you'll be getting a link to today. First prize $1,500, second prize $1,000, third prize $500. So $10 could win you $1,500. It's going for a great cause, so please send out the link to friends, to family. This is going to be our big fundraiser, and hopefully it'll be simple. No.
Could you go over that again?
Yes. To clarify, Jim, please come and introduce our speaker.
If at first you don't succeed, go back and read the directions. Today we have David Price. Any of you who have not seen the column in the Washington Post last week about our retiring congressman, written by E.J. Dionne, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist, there's a copy on the table that if you haven't had a chance to read it, you might want to take it home with you today. And never have we had a time when this is interesting, as in with many of us, who a lot of us have spent a lot of time figuring out how to do whatever it is we do, and then when we are the best at it that we ever can possibly be, we wear out and quit. And that's what's happened to, there's a chariot that David and I kept thinking, well, what is it that David and I have so much in common? Well, not all I can think of is that we're both old. And, but one thing that I think this week, I want to take just a second. David, let me read this one little sentence. David Price, and this E.J. Dionne, who's retired from Congress at the age of 82, after 17 terms in office, has been a special figure in public life. He's a loss to the institution and our politics precisely because he thinks institutionally. He believes that Congress matters and that individual members have obligations not only to themselves, their consciences, and their constituents, but also to making the first branch of government function effectively. And on that note, David says, why the hell didn't he write that 10 years ago when I was campaigning? David, welcome to the East Chapel Rotary Club, and thanks for your service to that community.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, everyone. I have a bum knee here, so I'm limping around a little bit, but I'm very glad to be here with you, and very glad, as it turns out, not to be in Washington, although I may still be your congressman, who knows? My successor hasn't been sworn in. Jim tells me that probably there will be some desire to deconstruct what's going on, and of course it may change as we speak here, as they go into session at noon. So I'm happy to do that after I say just a little bit, but I'd be happy to give you my best take on what's going on. But in terms of the backdrop for what's going on, I think what Jim just said is really the most important thing. And this is a quote from one of the insurgents' fundraising letters that accompanied his activity on the floor. Break the establishment once and for all. It's not like we want this policy or we want this person. We want to break the establishment. No government can operate on such a basis. There has to be some commitment, some minimal commitment to the institutions of democracy before we can even think about having a government that works. I'll just say one more thing about that. We have a bipartisan commission some of you know about. I initiated it actually 17 years ago, and I've spent a lot of my time, the second half of my congressional service, co-chairing the House Democracy Partnership, which is a bipartisan commission that works peer-to-peer, member-to-member, staff-to-staff with legislatures in developing democracies. And we have a saying that we always utilize when we're dealing with our colleagues, and that is, You may think free and fair elections are essential to democracy, and indeed they are. But even more important is what happens between elections. Because between elections, you either have democratic institutions that represent the range of the interests in the society and are able to translate that into effective policy. You either have that or you do not. But without institutions, democracy fails. That is a lesson that has become increasingly distant, I think, or vague to us these days with social media. We have many members of Congress now who are far more oriented to what Andy Biggs was doing. They're fundraising. They're in touch with millions of social media followers. They are and they're benefiting from this politically. It could matter less to them how they're going to accommodate their colleagues, let alone serve the institution's needs. Believe me, it matters not at all. I do think the Republican Party is far more afflicted with that than our party, partly because of a kind of anti-government ideology that's been there all along and has grown in recent years. But both parties have plenty of people for whom the description I just gave applies. So it's a constant struggle to make our institutions work and to make people see their, well, one thing is political advantage, but another thing is moral responsibility, after all, shouldn't it be? When you're in a position of trust, you do have a certain moral responsibility. And here too, I think our American individualism hasn't always served us well. This is an old enough room to where I can use the term Lone Ranger ethics. You know, that there's always a kind of advantage given to the insider, a kind of moral superiority attributed to the insider. The person who's always the critic, who's perpetually the critic. Well-known political scientist years ago wrote, you know, there are, he followed a lot of members of Congress around in their district and said every one of them ran for Congress by running against Congress. And what's the effect of that? Well, he said the institution bleeds from 435 self-inflicted cuts. Well, in a way, this is the denouement of that development. This is the extreme example of how a governing party cannot do even the basic thing of electing a speaker so that the rest of the business of the House can go forward. And you know what that foreshadows for the debt limit and for other issues that are going to be critical. But I'd say that's the basic virus, a kind of failure to appreciate institutions and the institutions critical to democracy, and a failure on the part of people in those, well, failure on the part of citizens, for one thing, to reward institutionally oriented behavior. In fact, it's a surefire political appeal to present yourself as the outsider. But then there is the failure, I think, of members of the institution themselves to understand what the very basic obligations of service require. What I thought I would talk about today, and I'll do so very briefly, is the closing days of the past Congress and some of the things that we very narrowly were able to achieve in those last days. Usually when I give these talks at groups like Rotary, it has to do with a kind of lay of the land report from DC. So I'll do a little bit of that, but then I'm happy to spend most of our time on whatever comments and questions you might want to raise. The last congressional session was pretty precarious. Everyone knows that. We had a 50-50 Senate. We had 4 votes to spare in the House. And it's in light of that that I think the legislative achievements are really quite impressive. You'd have to go back to maybe the immediate 2 years after President Obama's election, or maybe even go back to the Great Society to find a list of achievements like what was just produced, and all of those, of course, I mean, then all those rivals for this session would be periods when there was a much heftier Democratic majority. But even with the 50-50 Senate and a 4-vote margin in the House, we enacted major pandemic relief, we enacted major infrastructure investments, the so-called CHIPS and Science Bill, manufacturing investments, major manufacturing investments, the PACT Act, including the Camp Lejeune relief bill, long overdue benefits for veterans. Finally, the reform of the Postal Service, and then the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which enacted major healthcare cost reductions. For example, competitive bidding for a prescription drug under Medicare, and then also major incentives to clean energy. That's quite a lineup. At the very end of the session, which it's hard to believe, a week ago, or a little over a week ago, I was full-time in DC, and we were gasping over the finish line, finished on December 23rd. And we did pass our appropriations bills. And we have reached the point where if you can pass the appropriations bills only 3 months late and in a package, then that's considered a success. And that's exactly what I would consider this, given the alternatives. So that's my department. I presided back in the summer over the passage of a transportation and housing appropriations bill. In the end, it was stitched into this omnibus bill, and we passed the whole package on the 2 days before Christmas. Why is that important? Well, I'll just say what's in the transportation and housing bill is important. There's some sort of signature investments that we've made there that I'm very protective of and hoping to, and was very anxious to see passed. Major investments in passenger rail. This has been a project of many years standing, and we're benefiting from it locally. You've probably heard about the major grants we've gotten for developing the corridor from Raleigh to Richmond, which is the next and last major gap in the Southeast Rail corridor. That's a project that is long standing, and I think it's the future of passenger rail in this country. 5 or 6 regional corridors around the country, and we want to make sure the Southeast corridor is one of them. Transit, major investments in transit. Unfortunately, the Triangle has been left in the lurch on that one. Hopefully not for much longer, but we've had some major false starts on transit. We don't need to add another 1 million people to our population here before we try this again. Believe me. The local governments need to get together, and they're in the process of getting together on a multimodal transit plan. So while we've been able to take full advantage of the passenger rail money that we've invested in Washington, we've not yet taken full advantage of the transit money, except for the small starts, we call them. There's going to be a small start bus rapid transit route out in Martin Luther King Boulevard in this town, and there's going to be one out in Newbern Avenue in Raleigh. But the big event, the commuter rail across the Triangle, is yet to come, and I think is of great importance for the next generation of leaders, the continuing leadership of our community. On the housing side, we've gotten back in business. The Choice Neighborhoods program used to be called Hope 6. And Durham landed a $40 million grant in that program to develop that downtown area between Liberty and Main Street. That's a great achievement. It's always nice to get these things funded in Washington. It's even nicer when the money comes home. And that's what we've been able to do. We also have, once again, gotten in production the elderly housing for the disabled. You look around Chapel Hill, you see the effects of that in an earlier era. Manley Estates, Covenant Place. We're looking for nonprofits to take advantage of this renewed funding, to go after that sort of funding once again for quality housing for the elderly and for people with disabilities. Anyway, that's in the transportation housing bill. I'm very, very proud of it. The other thing, though, looking across the bill as a whole, I think it's going to be very difficult to pass normal budgets for the next 2 years. You have divided control of the House and Senate. You have what you see now among the House majority. I don't know how they pass the budget. I do not know how this is going to work. I think the likely outcome is probably continuing resolutions, which is basically putting the government on hold for the year at last year's funding level. That's probably the likely outcome for each of the next 2 years. So it was extremely important to pass the 23 bill, just what we just passed, because that sets the baseline. It sets the baseline for continuing resolutions at a better level. So we did gasp over the finish line, and now the new Congress is trying to get started. And by I don't know. There have been a lot of discussions. People are breaking out their constitutions and their rule books and their legal precedents. Nobody quite knows what the playbook is here. But it's pretty clear that the new Congress can't be sworn in, let alone do business before a speaker is chosen. So that's what's happening as we speak, and maybe it'll be resolved today. I think if it's resolved today, the most likely outcome still is that Kevin McCarthy somehow gets the support together. I don't think they can go home this weekend without resolving it. And so if this falters, then I think you'll see a new name, a totally new name. And I don't know who that might be, but they've got to vote for somebody. And as I said in the beginning, to the extent people are simply voting against authority, in some cases it seems against the very idea of authority, and it's hard to know what name would satisfy. But it does, one way or another, have to happen. And I still think the best bet is that Kevin McCarthy somehow gets this together. Of course, he's going to make some concessions in doing that are going to weaken him greatly. You may remember that what did end John Boehner was the prospect of a motion to vacate the chair.
Right.
Well, one of the rules they're insisting on is a rule to make it much easier to move to vacate the chair. I mean, it could be, with some of these guys, it could be a daily occurrence. It's certainly not going to strengthen the speaker or make concerted action more likely. Just one word finally about my own leadership. I have, for the last number of years, have chaired the Transportation and Housing Appropriations Subcommittee. It's a position that I had wanted all along and finally stayed there long enough to get it. The other position is the chairmanship of the House Democracy Partnership. That is going to change partisan hands because of the leadership change, but in this case it won't make any difference, or shouldn't make any difference, because it's a totally bipartisan activity. That's one of the things that's satisfying and important about it. And I was able, in the closing month, to take one last trip to Eastern Europe and to conclude a formal partnership with Moldova, North Carolina's sister state. Moldova is a small, struggling democracy in Eastern Europe. They've had on again, off again reform movements, but they've been now on a democratic path long enough with a stable enough government and enough of a parliamentary buy-in to this kind of program that we felt a formal partnership was called for. So we did get that done, and Moldova, I think that makes 24 now, developing countries in this institution building framework with the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm very proud of that, very eager to see it carried on under bipartisan leadership. Let me stop with that. There's a lot we could talk about, but I'm happy to respond to any comments or questions that you have. Yes, sir.
What if the Democrats picked out a Republican that could be a speaker, and they all agreed to vote for him and try to get 10 Republicans to vote for him?
Well, that Republican and those Republicans would be, their careers would be over forever, especially in this climate. I'm not saying that hasn't happened in state legislatures. It happened in this state legislature. You all remember Speaker Joe Mavretic? That's how that happened. A moderate, Roy Coble was part of that. People haven't always remembered that. But yeah, the more moderate, self-styled moderate members in both parties got together and elected a speaker who wasn't the candidate of either party. But that would be very, very hard in the House of Representatives. It's not impossible. If it happened, I think Well, it might be, I don't know. It certainly wouldn't involve a Democrat. Would have to be a Republican, and it'd be in this environment a pretty unusual Republican who would stand for election under those circumstances.
Courage in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Congressman, thank you so much for your decades of service to our community for coming here today. You've got a great perspective because of your long term in the Congress. You've seen a lot of things change. And I noticed you used the word bipartisan a lot today. And I'm wondering, is it now time that we look beyond a bipartisan model? Is it perhaps necessary that there's more than two parties, or a third party, a fourth party, where some of these fringe groups in both parties, the very far left, the very far right, could break off? And maybe that would break some of this. To me, if you say bipartisan, you're locked into only one or the other. How do we get more viewpoints represented in Congress and in our government?
Take a look at the Israeli Knesset. That's maybe the alternative, where every point of view has a faction, and then the conflict is shifted to another level. How do you put a government together with a majority of members, from 5 or 6 or 7 parties? I don't think there's a formulaic solution to this. There's certainly enough of a spread in our parties. In most countries we would have a multi-party system, and we might benefit. Some countries, when we're working with these parliaments in other countries, I'm certainly not urging on them a system like we have. For most of them, I think something like a parliamentary system probably works best, where you don't have division between the executive and legislative branches, and you, one way or another, you put a parliamentary majority together. But there are long-standing biases in our system against more than 2 parties. The first starting with the Constitution and the fact that we elect single members in 435 districts, first past the post, as they say, and so it's very, very hard for a third party to gain a foothold in that kind of system. They might gain a foothold in a few districts, but it's never going to amount to anything like a nationwide effort. I mean, it's just so you have to change a lot about our system to alter that. I think this is maybe wishful thinking, but the country basically needs 2 normal parties. We need a left or center party, and center left party, and we need a center right party. And both of those parties need to be reasonably accommodating to various points of view. They need to be big tents, in other words. The country needs both partisan and bipartisan capacity. I'm not one who rails against parties and partisanship. In fact, I've been a loyal member of my party. And I think right now these Republican members need to be loyal members of their party. I'm not asking them to be anything other than that right this minute. The party is an institution. The party is an institution that performs valuable democratic functions. That's why we have them. Even though the founding fathers didn't want us to have parties, we developed them in pretty short order. So there needs to be a certain partisan capacity to put a program together and to enact it. But then the country also needs bipartisan capacity. And of course, we need to know when we need which. But in a checks and balance system like ours, where often divided government prevails, you're going to need at the end of the day to come together and overcome partisanship. And both of those things are true. And both of them, I think, are running afoul now of our failure to think institutionally.
Thank you so much for being here today, and we understand and know you've just talked about your leadership on housing and transportation. Thank you for that. But also know that you've had a great deal to do with community service, national service, and I wonder if you could speak to us as a service organization about why you're so passionate about the AmeriCorps and the Corporation for National and Community Service.
Well, good. Thank you for bringing that up. I am passionate about that, and I expect a lot of you are as well. This is an issue that used to be more bipartisan than it is right now, but there still is some support in both parties for this. And I think I've urged very strongly on the Biden administration that they make it a signature issue, and that going forward these next 2 years, they pay a lot of attention to national service and to enabling more people to serve, and increasing the areas in which they serve. There's been talk of a Conservation Corps revival, and we do have some authorizing legislation for that. Question is what funding will follow. That might be the area of growth in climate and conservation areas. But in any case, Chris Coons is my counterpart in the Senate as the chair of the National Service Caucus. And we made a major push during the pandemic for diversifying the assignments of AmeriCorps members so as to serve pandemic needs and also get the funding up. And we succeeded to some extent in that, but not as much as we wanted. So I think it's a wonderful idea for individuals, especially young people in this country, to have a notion that one way or another they serve. We serve. We all serve. That's what being a citizen means. That ties in actually to this thinking institutionally that I started out with. One reason we have so much trouble, I think, thinking institutionally or thinking about our responsibilities as citizens, as members of all kinds of groups and communities, is that we're encouraged. It's in the drinking water in this country to think of yourself as a lone individual, making your way in the world. Well, none of us make our way in the world as lone individuals. We all are dependent on various kind of communities and institutions to nurture us and guide us along the way, and we in turn have obligations to give back. That somehow needs to be instilled in people in this country, I think. And military service, of course, is one way, but so is national service. And so that basis is because of that, what it would do for citizenship, what it would do for this country's sense of civic responsibility. That's, I guess, the basic reason that I think this is so important. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
There's a certain popular, even populist news station that is taking a different tack on what's going on in the House and saying, this is real democracy at work. This is the democracy of the people that's taking on the backroom deals. And how does somebody who believes in institutions, as you well pointed out, answer that? Because there has been, let's face it, in the past, a certain set of backroom deals that haven't always helped all the marginal groups or minority groups. And they've taken this now to the extreme and say this is real democracy in action, and the people who are criticizing what's going on with the voting are, Chicken Littles. How do you answer that?
It's hard to know where to start.
Listen to this stuff.
It's just a fundamental contradiction, the notion that democracy equals anarchy or democracy equals nihilism. I mean, democracy requires institutions. And by the way, understanding that does not commit us to defend institutions right or wrong. A part of, let me give you a good example. I've been thinking about this because I'm going to do the Lambeth Lecture next month at UNC, and I'm going to try to take on this topic in a little more systematic way. But I don't know, did any of you see Tim Ryan's concession speech in the Ohio Senate race?
Yes.
Okay. My estimate, I like him, and I think he's grown a lot, but my estimation of him went even higher when I heard that. You know what he said when he conceded? He says, I am privileged to concede this race. Not that I wanted to lose the race, but I am privileged to live in a democracy where we accept the results of elections, we accept the peaceful transfer of power, and losers gracefully concede. It is a privilege in that sense to concede this race. Okay, so we are all part of institutions, we are all part of collectivities, communities. That's where we get our identity, our sense of loyalty, our sense of obligation, and we owe something to those communities and those institutions in return. And these guys who are claiming to be proponents of democracy while absolutely trashing the institution they've just been elected to, they need to be called on it. They need to be called on it because there's no way that the House of Representatives, as a representative institution, can function under the kind of ground rules that they seem to think should prevail, namely that every person is just in it for themselves. They're all just appealing to their social media following or their fundraising base on the basis of being the only righteous individual among 434 bandits. Do you believe that? Should anybody believe that? But that's actually the implication of the way people have campaigned for Congress for a long time. And now it's really coming home to roost in a way that's quite extreme. Jim?
I think first, if anyone is not aware of it, that I think a part of the institution that you're referring to is the Republican Party, which in its caucus chose Kevin McCarthy. So the party chose Kevin McCarthy, and then under the sort of institutional rules, the party would gather to then make the leader of the majority party the Speaker of the House. The question that I have that I think others may have is that when we're choosing Speaker of the House, the Constitution, I think, is silent on the question of how that Speaker gets chosen. In this case, why might not a plurality count? Instead of having it be a majority of all members, but a majority of those who, a majority or a plurality of those who have voted at the time.
That's how one of the deadlocks in the past was resolved. After 100 ballots, they changed the rules and said plurality will govern. But the plurality did produce a member of the majority party. Right. Wouldn't be any guarantee that would happen in this case. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries would have been the Speaker of the House 10 ballots ago if you had gone by the plurality. So that would be that'd be kind of a reality check, though, wouldn't it? To say, okay, plurality governs, and it's going to be a member of the minority party unless the majority gets its act together. I don't know if even that would do it.
How are the rules established?
The rules are established. That's a good question. Where the rule comes from, that it's a majority of those present and voting. I think that's I don't know. Somebody may know more than I do about this. It's not the Constitution. You're right, but it's I think an ongoing rule of the House, but I'm not even sure.
It is. It's an ongoing rule of the House, and one of the things that's being discussed a lot today is a lot of people are leaving for the weekend, which is going to diminish the numbers. So I hope everybody knows that whoever knows. Well, no, I would just say, counting votes is what life is about on Capitol Hill. So with everything that's going on with the ups and downs and people leaving today, there's going to be a lot of whipping.
I'm just trying to better understand the personalities and the lack of bipartisanship, where if there is conversation, are Jeffries and McCarthy talking? Do they ever get together and say, hey, I could probably round up some votes if...
No,
do they not even talk?
Not in this instance. They might talk about other things, and in other instances where there's an attempt to get a kind of cross-party support for something. But this is a usually routine governing act by the majority party, and I don't think I don't think anybody is suggesting that there should be a kind of bipartisan vote for Speaker.
So just a follow-up to that, if the congressmen haven't been seated yet, then how is it they get to choose? I mean, if they're supposedly the majority, but they haven't been seated, how does that work?
Well, it's chicken and egg, right? I mean, they are members elect, and it's by the rules, it's members elect who are voting for this office.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they could be in the House, but interestingly enough, Jason Crow said he was not allowed to do a tour of the facility yesterday because he was still a congressman-elect.
Yeah, nor could they do casework, nor if China invaded Taiwan, could we do anything. Yeah.
More clear, I'm visiting Rotary from Oxford. Border security. It just seems like the can is being kicked down the road. Do we have committees in Washington, bipartisan, that sit down on a weekly basis that are trying to figure out a solution to the problem? I would just like to know some real information so that I know something's being done instead of just listening to whoever's telling me.
Well, there's a story this morning in the news that the Biden administration has taken an initiative on this, and it sounds to me like a pretty sound plan. They're going to everybody knows this Title 42 expedient, which was COVID related, is not going to hold up. And the question is, how do you deal with an influx in an orderly way that's fair to those who have genuine asylum claims, and a lot do. Others are just desperate people economically, so there's not a perfect solution. But what he is doing is setting a 30,000 a month quota as to people who will be accepted from these 4 key Latin American countries, and then is saying that others who don't present themselves at a port of entry, those who enter illegally, will be sent back summarily. And that's the way this is going to be handled for now. I don't know what a bipartisan plan would look like now. There are bipartisan efforts at immigration reform. Tom Tillis has been involved in one such that deal with some pieces of this. You know, the farm labor piece, for example, the Dreamers piece. There are aspects of this that we've resisted sometimes doing it piece by piece because we need a more comprehensive solution. But I think maybe that's up for reconsideration. Certainly with the Dreamers, it should have been reconsidered a long time ago, and we should have taken care of these young people who came here as children. But this Biden plan looks like a serious plan. It will invariably involve turning back people, though, without a full proceeding, who maybe should be entitled to a full proceeding, and that will just have to wait and see what the flow looks like, how manageable it is, and to what extent people can be accommodated who present themselves. That's all I can say. I think the ultimate solution. I had an interesting experience as a Homeland Security chairman. The situation in these home countries is, of course, quite desperate, and accounts for a lot of the pressures to seek a better life and to put yourselves in the hands of these coyotes and try to get across. John Kelly, when he was head of Southern Command, General Kelly, gave the most convincing testimony I've heard about the need to address the situation in these home countries. He said, we need a Plan Colombia with a Central American focus. Fast forward, John Kelly becomes President Trump's chief of staff, and Trump does just the opposite. Trump cut off the money that was going to those countries, let alone as a punishment, mind you, rather than doubling down on efforts to improve those situations. John Kelly then appeared again before us and kind of stammered his way through a very embarrassing situation. So I still think, Biden didn't talk about it today, but I still think he has talked about it, and I do think that's a critical part of the solution still, is addressing the home country situation. Longer term, that isn't going to take care of the daily flow. Yes, sir.
One last question.
I'm gonna dovetail at him. I'm gonna dovetail at him because his uncle, Congressman Charlie Rose, told me that's Robert's uncle. So he told me one time, he said, look, we get in the congressional dining room and we sit with anybody. We have a bipartisan meal, if you will. When did that change, in your opinion, where you could go and sit down and talk to people and solve problems?
Well, it hadn't totally changed, and I'm not sure those conversations ever, quote, solved problems, or, you know, they were cordial conversations, though, and we valued them. They aren't as common as they used to be, but they're still common, and there is still areas where we work relatively cooperatively. I'll just give you a couple, and I do think that needs to be recognized. What you see on C-SPAN is not the whole story, and you need to cultivate this capacity where you can. You get interviewed with roll call and all these periodicals, and so I was asked who were my best friends on the Republican side of the aisle a few weeks ago. A lot of them have moved on, but I gave a couple of answers that wouldn't have surprised anyone. I said, well, really, if you're talking about day-to-day interaction, it's the two ranking members that I work with in my two leadership positions. One is Mario Diaz-Balart from Florida on transportation and housing. The other is Vern Buchanan from Florida on the House Democracy Partnership. And House Democracy Partnership is totally nonpartisan. Always has been. I hope always will be. The Appropriations Committee is a little more complicated story, but there was a day when appropriations was largely bipartisan, and we saw it as an institutional function, us against the executive, whoever the executive was. That, of course, is not the way it is anymore, but at the stage of putting those bills together, it's still pretty cooperative. Mariano would like to say to people who are, involved in these omnibus bills and all this complication, give us 1 hour, we'll have a bill for you. And that's not far off. One of the things I'm proud of, I should have mentioned, so I'll mention it in one sentence worth. I, for the first time in this housing bill, got a dedicated funding stream for mobile homes, for manufactured housing, for preserving those communities, preventing them from being bought out and the rents being raised. Whatever local groups or governments want to do to preserve and enhance manufactured housing. Mario was with me on that. We did that cooperatively. And so there are areas where you can still work cooperatively, and those, of course, are cordial personal relations often accompany that. I do think members have some choice. There's a lot of these members who are doing what they're doing on the floor right now. They surely have a choice. They surely have a choice just within their own party. But we have a choice across parties. We can either fan the flames or we can be part of the solution. Sometimes you don't have much choice. It's determined at a higher pay grade. And there are issues worth fighting over, don't get me wrong. But not every issue is Armageddon. There's some issues where you can and should live to fight another day. And in the meantime, work out the best accommodation you can. I would not even suggest that no longer happens. It does happen. It just doesn't happen as often as it should. So we'll wrap up with the one here.
Real quick, I don't know if you can answer this question publicly, and maybe I'll ask two questions. Do you think Biden will run, and do you think Biden should run?
Oh my, that's a hard proposal. And I have no prediction, believe me. And I think ideally, if there was a consensus candidate in the wings, ideally, a person of Biden's age would not chance it again. But I don't know who that person is right now. And nor do I know how things are going to shape up with Donald Trump's re-entry. So it's a really tough call, I think, for him and for our party.
I think all these problems get exponentially worse if it's a Trump-Biden election again.
Well, if Trump's in again, if Trump is running again, I don't know where we go. I don't know where the Republican Party goes. The Republican Party desperately needs to recapture its center and its sense of institutional being a there. A party, what the Republican Party needed, if I may say so, is the equivalent of the elders who called Richard Nixon. Called on Richard Nixon and said, "You gotta go." That's what does not exist now. That's what kind of anti-institutional erosion over the years has created. There's no there. And so people take over the party and jerk it around with abandon. Our party has some problems along these lines, but nowhere near as many. Thank goodness. But both parties need to recapture their center. I don't mean just ideological center. I mean their substance, their integrity, their sense that the party matters and loyalty to the party matters. And it requires something of you other than just self-serving nonsense. I would wish that for both of our parties.
Everyone have a wonderful weekend. There will be a pop-up on Thursday at Squids. Hope y'all can make it.
I'm doing good. That was great.